How are things? Yeah, it's fall. It's nice, isn't it? Really, really nice. Yeah, I started getting out my longer pants. Can't get too crazy. I don't know if any of you understood the words to that last song that was sort of a rockin' song, but this congregation should know the words to that song. It's the song about the bride and the groom rejoicing in Jerusalem because the Lord has come. Yeah, and so it's just got a different tune and a beat, and so it's like actual fun music. So it's what our kids and we call Jewish rock and roll, because when you go to Israel, you actually can hear songs that are all based on the Bible, and they're actually sounding great and peppy and, jazzy and whatever kind of music you like with words from the Bible. So it's a lot different there. The music scene is a lot different there. All right, so what can I tell you? I'm not going to read you everything in here, but I will remind you that the boxes in the back are for any money that you can give us. We will not ask you for money for the rest of the evening, as is the Jewish way. We don't talk about money on Shabbat, and until we light those candles, Shabbat has not started for us. But we won't need too much air conditioning, I think, for the next few months, but heat now is becoming on the horizon. I'll make him wear all his sweaters that I knit him. But it probably still won't be enough for his little I'll have to knit you some gloves, some fingerless gloves where you can be on the phone and do touch screens and things. That'll be great. Okay, note to self, get some mittens done. Okay, tomorrow night we haven't had it because, high holidays. Okay, here's the thing about high holidays. If you were participating with us this year, you realize they come. And just when you think you're taking a breath of fresh air, there's another one, and then there's another one, and then there's another one for about 3.5 weeks. And that's fine. But then when you're done having the high holidays, it's like, okay, that got done. That's good. Sort of like, I don't know if you've ever felt like this, but you have a whole bunch of people over at your house for dinner or Thanksgiving or a birthday, and you work pretty hard to straighten the house up and make a meal, and then you have a really nice time with everybody, and then as you sit in your recliner afterwards, sometimes listening to your husband clean the kitchen. But even if you're not doing that, you just go, this feels great. This feels great. How many can you identify? No, Patrice, just, oh, good. I thought it was just me. But yeah, that's the way going through high holidays is. And you're tired, but it was worth it. It was worth it. So we thank you for those that have participated. Shabbat school, we are trying to get the young people together, and our next time will be next Friday evening. My grandson Jonas really enjoys it, so I think other kids really enjoy it too. We have a council meeting on Sunday. Anyone want to take my place? No? Oh, okay, you're pretty smart. That's what I have. Oh, Stump the Stars tomorrow night. If you have not sent in a question, okay, here's the rules about you send it in at stumpthestars@gmail.com. Stump the Stars is all one word. Okay, here's the rule. There are no rules. Ask any question you want. I can think of Monty Python unanswerable questions, but not those kind. That's not the kind I mean. Can God make a square circle? Not those kinds. All right. But if you have something that's been bugging you, or something someone asked you or mentioned, people mention things like at lunch, and you're going, I have no idea how to answer that. I'm sure it's in the Bible. I don't know where that is. It's too hard. So we could answer all those kinds of questions, or a lot of those questions, if we only knew what it was. And for us to know what it is, you have to send it to us. And then we We'll put our minds at work, and we have to get rid of the smoke. It's very scary at our house when we put our minds together and cogitate, isn't it? Yeah, okay. That was good. Good. So anyway, if you hear me on a week where we're not having stuff that starts, just write it down and you'll get it to us. But anyway, that's what we do, and we have a good time. And if nobody sends us questions, we make up our own questions. It's great. We enjoy that. Tomorrow, if nobody sends us some pithy questions, we will probably continue in our series on anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism that people don't know that they have. And so you can always look forward to that. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm glad there's a lot of people who've come tonight. And it's a good time for Shabbat. Shabbat never arrives too quickly or too slowly. It always arrives right on time. And so one last thing to remember. Always give 100% of yourself, except if you're giving blood. Okay? Shabbat shalom. We'll see you later.
And as we begin our service together, I want to welcome those of you who've joined us virtually. We're grateful that you're part of our extended community, and we're glad that you've come to join us on this particular Shabbat to encounter God in this special way that He set aside for us. And we're reminded of just what a special day it is as we now join Jacob as he leads us with Lecha Dodi, the traditional welcoming of Shabbat, pages 14 to 25. And since we are truly welcoming Shabbat, we will stand up, face the door, as if we are actually welcoming Shabbat through those doors. Shabbat is called the Queen of Days, so we welcome the Queen of Days, but we also anticipate the King of the Ages, as the verses of Shabbat, of Lecha Dodi remind us. Pages 14 to 25.
Lecha Dodi likarat katla, pane Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likarat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmianu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shamo echad, L'shem el tiferet v'litila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelka, ki hi mikor ha'bracha. Mehirosh mikadem nasucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshavat chila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Hitnari me'afar kumi, Lishe bigder tifak tekami. Al yad ben Yishai beit halachmi, Karva el nafshi gala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Hi torare, kiva ore komi ori, uri shirde beiri, kavod Adonai alaich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pane Shabbat nekabela. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Observe and remember in a single statement, the unique God caused us to hear his command. He alone is Lord, and his name is unique, to his fame and splendor and praise. Together, come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Let's go to meet the Sabbath, for she is the source of blessing from the beginning, anointed from ancient days, though made last, conceived first. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Shake the dust off yourself, rise. Dress in garments of glory, my people. Jesse's son, the Bethlehemite, draws near, bringing us redemption. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Wake up, your light has come. Arise, shine, awake, awake. Sing a grand song. The glory of God is revealed to you. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath.
Please be seated. Two quick reflections. Number one, it's in this week's readings that we read of the origin of Shabbat as part of God's creation. So this has been around since the days of old, since the days of creation. That's part of why this is such a special time, an opportunity to interact with the God of all creation. The last of the verses that Jacob led us in, arise, shine, your light has come, reminds us it's now time to actually light the Shabbat lights. And as we do so, we remember that Shabbat's the sign that God has said to us, he is our God forever, and we are his people permanently.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart by your commandments and commanded us to light the candles for the Sabbath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahayot ol lagoyim v'natan lanu Yeshua Mishikenu ha'or leolam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to be a light for the nations and gave us Yeshua, our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat Shalom.
We've just greeted one another with Shabbat Shalom. We now pray for Shalom, as we have become accustomed to doing so, for the people of Ukraine. And the prayer goes like this: Avinu Malkeinu, our Father and our King, in these troubled days we pray for peace, in the name of the Prince of Peace, Yeshua, our Messiah. God of grace and mercy, may your protection be upon the Ukrainian people in this time of trial, especially upon the most vulnerable, which includes many Jewish people, as well as countless children and elderly people. Give wisdom and direction to the leaders of Ukraine as they respond to this invasion. Guide other world leaders, especially those in the United States, into ways of responding with appropriate force and decisiveness. May the plans of Russia's leadership be reversed, and may their power and hold over the Russian people be dismantled. As it is written in the Proverbs, the ruler's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it whenever he will. May you in your mercy then hold back the forces of chaos and violence that are mounting in the world today. Wherever there is oppression and suffering, may your Spirit bring hope. Be with all who call upon your name, and enable us all to be makers of peace and bearers of hope. And may there be fulfilled soon and in our days the words of the prophet Isaiah. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn more anymore. The one who is the Prince of Peace is also described as the light of the world. And we reflected on that briefly with the second of the prayers over the lighting of the candles. We now enter into that throne room scene where he sits, enthroned in the heavenly realms. And as I remind you on a regular basis, this is a picture that was envisioned by the rabbis of old, Messiah seated in the heavenly realms. And so we enter that scene and we respond on pages 40 and 41 along with Jacob.
האלוהים אשר דיבר מקדם פעמים רבות ובדרכים רבות אל האבות ביד הנביאים דיבר עלינו באחרית הימים האלה ביד הבן אשר שם ליורש כל ובידו גם עשה את העולמים וזוהר כבודו וצלם עצמותו ונושא כל בדברו רב הגבורה ולאחר שיעשה טיהור חטאים ישב לימין הגדולה. In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets and many times in various ways. But now in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority, beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
In keeping with that closing paragraph, we continue our response to our God, extending to him our gratitude for his graciousness. And in fact, we do so in a variety of forms of Kaddish. Sephardi Kaddish is the form we've become most familiar with, pages 156 and 157. It not only gives us the opportunity to express our gratitude to our God, it is also, in effect, our wish or our hope or our anticipation for what the future holds, even in our day and age. And as those pages remind us, part of that wish, that hope, that anticipation for what the future holds is expressed in the words, may he cause his salvation to sprout, taken from our daily prayers, and may he bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and your days. Jacob leads, we now respond.
יתגדל ויתחדש המרבה, בעלמא דברך ירותי, וימליך מלכותי, ויצמח פורקני וקרב משיחי, בחייכון וביומכון חי דחו בית ישראל, והגלה ובזמן קרב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך. וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמד קודשא בריחו לעילא מנחו ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תהמירן בעלמא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים טובים אלינו וכל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו וכל ישראל ויאמרו amen. Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world which is created according to his will. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom and cause his salvation to sprout, and bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and in your days, and in the life of all the house of Israel, speedily, yes soon, and say, Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and forever eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world, and say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven, and good life for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen. He makes peace in the heavenly realms. May he make peace for us, for all Israel, and say, Amen.
Turn now to pages 34 and 35 for the Shabbat blessings. This is a delightful way of welcoming Shabbat as well, because it reminds us that the one who is truly the ruler of the universe, who is in fact the Lord our God, is the one who brings on the evening twilight. And in that sense, he does create or recreate day and night, causing the light to pass away before the darkness. And so, this becomes our response now as we continue to express our gratitude to him and remind ourselves of the greatness of the God in whose presence we find ourselves. We do this responsively. Are you going to lead us? By all means.
Responsively?
Yeah.
Do the second paragraph together?
Second paragraph together, yes.
Okay. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who by your word brings on the evening twilight, and by your wisdom opens the gates of the heavens. With understanding you order the cycles of time and vary the seasons, setting the stars in their courses in the sky according to your will. You create day and night, causing the light to pass away before the darkness and the darkness before the light. By your will the day turns into night. The Lord of heavenly hosts is your name. O ever-living God, rule over us forever. Blessed are you, O Lord, who brings on the evening twilight. Together, with everlasting love you have loved the house of Israel, teaching us your Torah and precepts, your statutes and judgments. Therefore, O Lord our God, when we lie down and when we get up, we will meditate on your instructions and rejoice forever in the words of your Torah and in its teachings. For they are our life and sustenance. We will meditate upon them day and night. May your love never leave us. Blessed are you, O Lord, who loves your people, Israel.
Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. That second paragraph, which is our response, reminded us of another part of our approach to God, which is now going to be carried out a little further in the Shema, beginning in the pages directly below, pages 34 to 39. I'm going to ask you to stand, face Jerusalem, which is the direction of the ark, as we now, in effect, affirm exactly what we just said, that we will, in fact, when we lie down and when we get up, meditate on your instructions forever. Because you are the one who is our God. You are the one whom we will follow fully. That's the essence of the Shema as we now respond on pages 34 to 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשפך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך. וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
We continue to express our love for the Lord our God through the words of the Amidah. The portions tonight are paragraphs 1 through 3, pages 66 to 71. We do this quietly, and the encouragement is to make these words your own words of response to God and use them as springboards to express further response to our God, as it describes the greatness and the awesomeness of the God who is our King, who loves us and whom we love with all of our hearts. Pages 66 to 71. Mikamoka, Ba'al Givurot, who is like you? You are the Lord of might, which is why we sanctify your name in the world, as they sanctify it in the highest heavens. As it is written by your prophet, they call out to each other, and they say,
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. All the earth is full of his splendor. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Malok haaretz kevodo.
Then across from them comes back this resounding response,
Praised, praised be the splendor of the Lord, everywhere it is manifested. Baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo.
And then in the holy writings it is further said,
The Lord shall reign forever. your God, O Zion, for all generations. Yimloch Adonai leolam Elohai Zion lador vador. Hallelujah.
And so in every generation, including our own, we will tell of your greatness, and in every age we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise will certainly never depart from our lips, for you are a great and holy God and King. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. Blessed are you, O Lord, you are the holy God. As part of our response at the end, we said, the Lord shall reign forever, your God, O Zion, for all generations. And then we described him as a great and holy God and King. Those realities, those reflections, those affirmations will be shared worldwide in the time to come that Vahi Ben Soa reminds us of, in fact, looks forward to on pages 88 and 89.
Vayhi ben Aaron, vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai vayofutsu oivacha vayanusu, misanecha mipanecha, ki mitzion teitze Torah, ki mitzion teitze Torah, odavar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, le'amo Yisrael b'kdushato. And it came to pass whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel. Misheberach Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, ve'Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Alex, may he bless John, may he bless Matt, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families, and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach, Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam vaed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mechol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Bless the Lord who is blessed. Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah.
Bereshit bara Elohim et hashmayim ve'et haaretz. V'haaretz hayta tohu v'vohu, v'choshek al panei tahum. Ruach Elohim merchefet al panei hamayim. V'omer Elohim Yahi Ohr, Vayhi Ohr, Vayira Elohim et haor ki tov. Vayivdal Elohim bein haor uvein hachoshek. Vayikra Elohim laor yom. V'lachoshek kara laila. Vayhi erev, Vayhi boker, yom echad. Please be seated. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and everything in between is the implication. The earth was formless and void, or filled with chaos and darkness. Darkness covered the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered above the surface of the water. The Lord spoke, "Let there be light," and there was light. The Lord saw the light, that it was very good, and He divided, and God divided between the light and between the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. It was evening, it was morning, day one. I happened to notice when Jenny was closing for us in Deuteronomy 34, there's the verse that says, there has not arisen a prophet like Moses in all of Israel since, because he knew the Lord face to face. Panim el panim. And I thought, face is it twice in my passage as well, when I rolled back to Genesis. And I thought, because God is declaring that He knew someone so well, so face to face, I thought that was the point of the entirety of the Torah, was to get to know all of us like that. Their face appears twice in just a few verses that I've read. Darkness was on the face of the deep, and also the Spirit of the Lord hovered on the face of the waters, or the surface. And those were the only faces, just forces of nature. Or just descriptions. God wanted to know living beings like Himself, beings filled with compassion. And so He wrote the entirety of the Torah and concluded in Deuteronomy 34, and He continued to have a relationship with us as a people, and also with us as believers, as it says in Elohim Asher, at many times and in various ways. But that was always the point. That people had a living relationship with the God who is behind this living word. And the living word is alive because the God behind it is alive. Shabbat Shalom.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam netavotochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah.
He gave us the Torah. We celebrated that at Shavuot. We reminded ourselves of what a great gift it is at Simchat Torah. And now we affirm it as our ancestors did. And as our ancestors did, and they stood in the presence of God, so we do as well. We stand, we respond. On pages 98 and 99 with Vosot HaTorah. If you need a transliteration, that's page 95.
V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel, and is accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
And now we're ready to respond on pages 96 and 97 with Etz Chaim Hi. It's a tree of life. These are words that come from God. As words come from God, they're intended to shape our lives. They're intended to take deep root in our lives like a tree taking root in the ground. And so our response is just that. Pages 96 and 97. Etz Chaim Hi. Renew our days as of old.
Etz Chaim hi lemachazikim ba vetom keha meushar deracheha darchei noam vechol nativoteha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu kekedem. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu kekedem. A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
Renew our days as of old, as I've mentioned before, is a reflection of life as it was in Eden. And that's what we anticipate. And as we're renewed in that kind of fashion, we're better prepared to stand in his presence as we do yet again. And we respond on pages 98 and 99 with Uvnu Ho Yomar. We stand as his priests. We stand offering our commitment as well as our gratitude.
Uvno Ho Yomar, Shuva Adonai Revavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. Ba'avor David adecha, al teshev pnei mishichecha. Kilchach tov natzati lechem, torati al ta'azovu. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
And of course, you know the instructions at this point. Greet those around you. Wow, and a hush fell on the crowd. Well, we've begun again in our Torah reading cycle. So we're back at the beginning, quite literally. Now around the world in synagogues, we read the opening chapters of Genesis this week. And we start with Bereshit, the Hebrew for Genesis. Well, no, it's not the Hebrew for Genesis, but it's the Hebrew name for the book of Genesis. So anyhow, we start with Bereshit, both the book and the parsha, which has the same title. As the passage opens, we find ourselves at the very origin of the universe. It's dark. It's stark. It is, as the Hebrew text says, tohu vavohu. All kinds of translations here, but ultimately what it means is chaotic and empty. Very much like you would imagine the scene had you been there at the Big Bang. Yet, as the reading continues, God brings light in the text that Matthew read. God brings order to his universe throughout these chapters. And God fills the void, literally, the emptiness. And then you know what he does? He declares that what he has created is good. It's good. Now, this is how the Jewish people's creation story goes. By the way, this story is consistent with the science. Sometimes you don't hear that. An Orthodox Israeli scholar by the name of Gerhard Schroeder actually worked from the text and calculated that the text indicates a time period of roughly 15 billion years. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I suggest you go to reasons.org. Reasons to Believe specializes in the interrelationship between science and the Bible. But if you really want to know what's going on, I suggest you join me in the spring for the course Messianic Apologetics. Did you like the way I snuck in a commercial? Okay, good. Well, on the other hand, Genesis 1-2, the Genesis 1 to 2 account is in stark contrast to the creation stories of the ancient Near East. If this is of interest to you, I suggest two books. G.E. Wright, spelled W-R-I-G-H-T, The Bible Against Its Environment, or John Walton, Ancient Israelite Literature and Its Cultural Context, both of these texts explain in great detail how what you find in the biblical text stands in stark contrast to what's in the world around us. So also the creation account of Genesis 1 and 2, in stark contrast to the creation stories of the ancient Near East. And let me suggest that this can be clearly seen in the story of Jonah. Jonah? Yep, most certainly Jonah. By the way, do recall that just 2 weeks ago in our readings, Jonah, the book of Jonah, concluded Yom Kippur and the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, and therefore the observance of Rosh Hashanah as the commemoration of creation as well. So it's almost as if Jonah is still hanging around. He's still hovering or lingering in the background as you read Genesis. Well, with that, by way of introduction, on to Jonah and this different kind of creation story. If you want to follow along, do find the book of Jonah. And if I had been sharp, I would have told you what pages that can be found on. But if you look at the table of contents, you can very quickly follow it. I will read certain sections of the book. Now, the book begins with Jonah running away from God and the purpose or the call that God had given him. And then chapter 1, verses 4 to 6, picks up with the story in this fashion. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose. Those three phrases, keep those in mind. The Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and a violent storm arose. Continuing, a violent storm arose so that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried to his own God. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Let me pause in the story for a second. Does that sound at all familiar to anybody? Good, I'm glad it does sound familiar. You find it in Matthew chapter 8. Anyhow, the story goes on. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us and we will not perish." Does that also sound familiar? Yeshua's followers came to him during that storm on that sea, and he was asleep. And they said, "Lord, save us." Anyhow, back to Jonah. Look, for the people of the ancient Near East, the gods had created order by defeating the powers of chaos. And their story was somewhat similar to what we read in Genesis chapter 1 and the following verses. But for them, these forces of chaos had been merely tamed. They had not been abolished. And so they remained a constant threat. The embodiment of these lawless and chaotic forces for them was the sea. And that stands in stark contrast then to what we read in our creation story. Genesis 1:2, Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. The image is that of the Spirit of God ruling over the sea, unheard of for the rest of the ancient Near East. The sea, which people could not control or tame as they understood it. Therefore, frequently, God's control of the sea is used to stress his complete lordship over all of creation. And in fact, in one of the Psalms associated with Rosh Hashanah, New Year's Day, you have Psalm 24, which simply says, he has founded it where? On the seas. He has established it where? On the waters. He's the God who rules over them. And then in Psalm 89, verse 9, it expressly says, the psalmist says, you rule over the surging seas. Unheard of for the people of this time period. Oh, and by the way, next week, we're going to read in the Parsha, Genesis chapter 6, verse 17. God says, I am going to bring flood waters on the earth, like he brought up the storm here. He's the God who rules over that. The wind on the sea and the storm arose. Furthermore, the captain's command to Jonah that he pray reflects two things. It reflects both the heathen concept that the amount of prayer is of importance. By the way, Yeshua references this as well in Matthew 6, as well as the fact that under a polytheistic system as theirs was, one could seldom be sure which God had been displeased and therefore which God had to be appeased. With me so far? Okay, now on top of all that, in the next couple verses, Jonah calls his God the God of heaven. Verse 9. That's in stark contrast to the way the gods of those days were known. You had the God of Nineveh, you had the God of Phoenicia, you had the God of war, you had the God of love, and so forth. But our God we described as what? Melech HaOlam, King of the universe, where we sing Adon Olam, Lord of the world. You see, in a polytheistic society, it was difficult to find a title that would more perfectly express the supremacy of the Lord. And beyond that, what truly terrified the sailors was the addition of the phrase, the Lord who made the sea and the land. Look, they knew that Jonah was running away from his God, the Lord, whom they knew just to be the God of Israel. Now, they had therefore regarded his action as reasonable, perhaps even amusing. If he's the God of Israel, if Jonah runs away from Israel, he's running away from God. God is stuck in Israel. Jonah's now on the sea. Does that follow? For them it did. As Phoenicians, they certainly did not take seriously Jonah's claim that the Lord was superior to their god, Baal. But now, Jonah had, and in the middle of the raging storm on the sea, Jonah had claimed that in fact the Lord was the creator of that sea. And that, of course, is underlined by those phrases I asked you to remember. The Lord brought a wind onto the sea and caused a raging storm. That reinforces or emphasizes this understanding. So, terrified, the sailors said, they did not ask. The text says they said, "What have you done?" It's an exclamation, it's not a question. Moving on, verses 11 to 16 of that first chapter. And by the way, as we look at this text, or as I read this text, picture this through their eyes. View it from their perspective. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm for us?" In other words, since your God apparently has influence over the sea. which he had just claimed. And so Jonah replied, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm." Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Again, through their ears and through their eyes. Then they cried to the Lord. They didn't cry to their gods, but they cried to the Lord. "O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man." Let me pause again. Notice their assessment of him, therefore the book's assessment of him, innocent man. Back to the story. "Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, have done as you pleased." What an acknowledgement, especially from people from this background. Then they took Jonah, threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew suddenly calm. At this, when they saw this, the men greatly feared the Lord. Look, I could have written that line, given that background. When they saw this, of course they feared the Lord. But they feared the Lord, and notice they offered a sacrifice to the Lord, and they made vows to him. Wow. Look, since the sailors' religious outlook could make no sense of a God of heaven creating and controlling the sea, in fact, at this time they probably did not even think of the sea as created, but regarded it as a remnant of the original chaos. So anyhow, back to what I was saying. Since they could make no sense of a God of heaven creating and controlling the sea, to throw Jonah overboard then was equivalent to murdering him. And they could not even know for certain whether they were actually doing the Lord's will if they did that. And so they feared that the Lord might punish them for the death of his servant. So they tried very hard to set him ashore, even though that involved great risk to the ship. In verses 15 and 16 we read that the storm ceased. And so the immediate cessation of the storm, after they threw Jonah overboard, showed them that the Lord really had control of the sea. And their response is, so they offered a sacrifice to the Lord, not to their gods, but to the Lord. And they made vows to him. They made vows to him. Talk about a radical conversion. There you have it. And then we have the closing verses of the chapter and the opening verse of chapter 2. And what an epilogue this is. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Quick aside here. He was there for 3 days and 3 nights. That impacts how you should read that when you read about that in the chronology of Yeshua's last week. 3 days and 3 nights. More on that, guess where? Messianic Apologetics in the spring. All right, and then it continues. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. Now look, this is telling us that the Lord is definitely Jonah's God. And Jonah acknowledged that. In the ancient Near East mythology, which finds numerous allusions within the Older Testament poetic language, ready? Chaos is pictured by the sea monster Leviathan. Some old translations even utilize that as part of a translation of text we have. The sea monster Leviathan pictures chaos. And to Jonah and those familiar with the old mythological imagery, ready? The great fish represented Leviathan. Now, follow the logic. Since Leviathan itself was at God's disposal, at the Lord's disposal, what does that mean? It means that every force in the world, however potentially dangerous, is completely under the Lord's dominance and control. Look, we already saw the hint of that. The Lord sent a wind, where? Unto that chaos of the sea, and a great storm arose. In chapter 4, he's going to cause a plant to spring up, and just as quickly he causes the plant to, what should we say? I was going to say spring down, but you know what I'm talking about. What is being said here that we must understand is that this God, the Lord, whom Jonah proclaimed, is in fact, as one of his titles describe him, El Elyon, higher than the highest, whereas another of his titles reminds us, Adonai Tzevaot. He's the master over every force, higher than the highest, master over every force. And he, this one, is there for us as well, in all the uncertainties of life. Now, I want you to take a journey with me to Nineveh and think about the implications for Nineveh of this particular story, especially as you understand the mythology of the ancient Near East. In other words, listen to this story through the ears of the Ninevites. Imagine this story as they would have heard it. They heard the story. There's this strange Jewish prophet who's trying to leave his God behind in Israel. And because he's doing that, his God raises up a storm on the sea where no God ever acts. So we toss him into the sea, and it suddenly calms. And on top of that, Leviathan comes and swallows him up. So they'd hear that story. Oh, by the way, remember Jonah was in the fish for 3 days and 3 nights? So the story had a head start of 3 days and 3 nights before Jonah shows up on the doorstep of Nineveh. Now, he's been in the fish 3 days and 3 nights. He has a somewhat bleached appearance. That adds to the story. Now, think about this with me and hang in there. No wonder then they all responded. In other words, they got wind of the story and they saw Jonah's fishy appearance. Thank you for those of you who followed me on that. By the way, quick aside here. I'm recalling an account that I read a number of years ago, an account that goes back to the 1800s, where some poor fisher dude, not from my family, ended up in the water, got swallowed by a big fish. And a couple days later, they literally fished him out. He was still alive, but he was bleached. So this isn't a story that is a made-up story. It has happened. Anyhow, back to the beginning. Throughout the creation text, Genesis 1 and 2, we're told that at the close of each day, whatever day means, and that's a whole other story. Again, guess where you'll find that story? Next spring with me in a Messianic apologetics class. Now, I didn't put this together to be a huge commercial, but it just happens to work out that way. Anyhow, at the close of each day, we're told that God looked over what he had done and he described it as good. However, we're told, and the Hebrew word for good is tov, as you heard it read. However, we're told in the text that after creating humans, God looked at his creative activity that day, which included other created things, and he said, Tov ma'od. Ma'od meaning very, or extremely, or incredibly. Let me paraphrase our former, or our late friend, Rabbi Dr. Friedman. His paraphrase of verse 31. All my creation is good, God says, but only after I made humans do I declare everything as incredibly good. Tov ma'od. Look, the Hebrew text and its poetry leads us to think in this direction. In other words, it brings on further thoughts along this line. God expects this incredibly good addition to his already declared good creation to do what he created us to do. In fact, this is the meaning of the word good, ultimately, to do fully what you were created to do. Now, this is true for humankind, for plants and trees, for all created things, and even for inanimate materials. Every aspect of his creation was for a purpose. And when we live out that purpose, we are then fully living the definition of good. Jonah did it in his day and impacted a major empire. He did it, and we can as well. After all, remember, where it's dark and stark, our God shines light. Where things are chaotic, our God brings order. Where life is empty, our God fills the void. and where we follow him, our God produces good. Are you ready to walk with him? Take the next minute or so for a time of reflection in quiet as you respond. We look forward to a time when the creation story ultimately climaxes. As the Elena reminds us, it's the time when the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. It's when all abominations will cease and all false gods will come to an end. We respond there now as we rise, facing Jerusalem yet again, with the words of the Elena, pages 102 to 107. As we recall, as the text itself says, we've got a calling and a task. We've got a purpose, as the story of creation reminds us.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו כחל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ובמושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו, אין עוד, אמת מלכנו, אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבותה. אל לבביך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. Together, it is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for He has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs. Our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. For he stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. There is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled, the Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. And let me say again to those of you who've joined us virtually, we're grateful that you've joined us, that you have come to experience God, the creator of the universe, in this special way on Shabbat. And of course, we look forward to seeing you again, not only next week on Shabbat, Friday night at 7:30, but we'd love to see you as well tomorrow night for Stump the Stars Jewish Style at 7 o'clock.